So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And we're here with Severus Bagnoli. And we are here at Noble Knight Games up in Fitchburg, Wisconsin still. And very grateful for you for carving out some time for us to walk us through your new and upcoming design, which is Vijayanagara, which has been released from GMT Games as part of their Irregular Conflict series, Game 1 in that series. And we just kind of we've never played this game, and so just thought we'd like to take an opportunity.
Although you have offered multiple times on Tabletop Simulator, I'm sorry that we've never accepted that.
We made it work. Here we are.
Here we are.
It got
worked
done.
out. So,
but this might be a slightly different format to what you're used to. But we're just going to kind of have you teach us the game and kind of just walk us through what the game's about and how to play it, and then we're going to kind of sit down and play it, and then we'll probably make a little video afterwards as
we
well.
would also like book reports on the 6 books that you have there.
Hope this is in shot because the viewers will be expected to get this read before watching the video.
Yeah, well, they want the bibliography so that they can order the books. That's what
it's actually great.
Does.
I mean, having a book that pairs nicely with the game is one of the things we love about this hobby. Right?
So yeah, nothing super kind of formal here. Just kind of let's launch us into the game and what we've got in front of us and what we're looking at.
Okay, and then we're all going to view the game upside down for the whole way.
We are, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
we're the cool guys.
Okay, well, we're in 14th century India. That's the time and the setting. We, it was COVID when this first started being designed, so as I think Volko likes to say, a lot of our enjoyment of these games is tourism, not just in space but in time, and especially a couple of years ago, it was great to just get out of here and go back to the 14th century India, which, I don't know or didn't know a lot about, and most of the people I'm around don't know a lot about it. And even a lot of the Indian postdocs and graduate students that I get to interact with don't know that much about this period of time.
So one question I have for you, is there any other game on this period that you're aware of?
Not that I know of.
So this will kind of be the inaugural game.
I think it's going to get a lot of people,
Empire.
Yeah, I think it'll get people into this this territory of history. Yeah, plant a little flag over there, I guess. This will be very familiar to coin aficionados. It carries a lot of the same DNA, and it came out of it was the winning entry in the Consim Game Jam, which was a COVID era 72-hour contest, and the constraints for that contest were to recycle a coin game. And so Bruce Mansfield's Gandhi was on the table in the other room, and it's just such a nice presentation and interesting. And the motivation then was to go back and dig up what else is going on this particular piece of land in history, and this just, I don't know, it just popped out as a really interesting idea, I think. So since you're mostly familiar, I think this will be fairly smooth. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've tried to teach it.
I'm not as smart as I look on camera.
Fair.
So it's going to be interesting.
We'll hold your hand. The track on the top is, as usual, a track for measuring resources. And we're missing just this one. Okay. And also victory points.
And these are not the final components, right?
These are not the final components.
Borrowed from Falling Sky and Fire in the Lake, I believe. Where were the black ones from?
These are from Gandhi.
Gandhi, okay, yep.
Yep.
So anyway, just make sure that's clear, but this is near final art for the board.
Near final art, and my understanding is they'll have an advanced copy in the next couple of weeks, which I'm very excited about.
I wish we could have just done this in 2 or 3 weeks.
Come on back,
yeah.
So unlike in some of the coin games, each faction has just a number of victory points. And at the end of the game, we're just going to compare points. That's it. Whoever has the most points wins. Ties are broken by resources.
Okay.
There are 3 playable factions in the game: the Delhi Sultanate, the Bahmani Kingdom, and the Vijayanagara Empire. There's a 4th non-playable faction, the Mongol invading army. That faction will take actions which are dictated at various points in the game by the Bahmani Kingdom and the Vijayanagara Empire. Okay. In terms of the map spaces, the green spaces are all provinces, and they have a value of prosperity of either 1 or 2. Due to a lot of maritime activity and connection to Central Asia, the provinces on the west coast are generically more valuable, as is Bengal, which has some other access to horses and cavalry, which were needed to be imported primarily in the time. There are also these 2 Mongol invasion regions, Punjab and the Mountain Passes. Mountain Passes, Punjab, and Delhi, which is the only city in the game which can be occupied, those can only be accessed by the Delhi Sultanate and the Mongol invading cubes, so the other factions can't enter these spaces. Each province begins the game in a tributary relationship to the Delhi Sultanate. And so that's kind of the principal model, which deviates from a lot of the coin series games, which is that rather than support and these types of measures, it's a little bit more simplistic in, is the money flowing or not?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you can imagine there are many kind of minor rulers in these areas, and more or less they're all on the same page that, every year we send gold and cavalry and elephants and what have you back to the Sultan because,
They protect us.
It's something like that. They do
There's
actually.
the Mongol horde over here.
They do play that role, although I think the primary driving factor for why you send tributary payments back to Delhi is that if you don't, they come and they remind you.
Got it. Yeah.
In a
Breaks
fairly
the kneecaps.
uncomfortable way. Yeah, that happened many, many times. More often than not, they would come, and the Delhi Sultanate at this time was not actually leaving standing armies or anything throughout the Deccan. It was not tenable to keep that kind of control over this amount of space, but they would go, knock on the door, remind the faction to send the tributary, and then come back to Delhi. They did keep a standing army up in the northwest, though, at various points in the game, in the century, because of repeated Mongol invasions through the mountain passes from modern-day Afghanistan. And in 1303, they actually did sit inside of Delhi while Alauddin Khalji, the Sultan, was out in the south. They just thought, we'll just go ahead and sit here now.
He was a way reminding people of tribute,
Yes.
and they kind of moved in the back door.
They did. They came right in the
Nice.
back door. So he had to rapidly return back.
Yeah.
And we'll see that come in the game,
Okay.
where in the event that that kind of thing happens, they're going to need to bring troops back towards Delhi.
Got it.
Okay, so the provinces, they start off the game as tributary provinces, and at some point in the game, it's going to be possible to remove this tributary marker. At that point, a province with no tributary marker is independent. At that point, control becomes a relevant concept. If the tributary marker is down, control is meaningless.
Okay.
Once it's removed, it's independent. Now, the faction that has a majority of pieces in that space, in that kind of usual coin style, will control the space. And as part of that, as we'll see, that's immediately going to lead to those pieces flipping up and planting their own independent flag.
Okay.
So we would call this a Bahmani-controlled independent province.
Got it.
At that point, if other factions are moving in, the control changes and rapidly another flag might be planted there. The Sultan, meanwhile, is going to try to work to plant that tributary marker back down because that is A, part of their win condition, and B, is how they make sure that the gold is flowing. And if they stop getting resources, then they have lots and lots of problems.
I did notice each space has a circle for potentially those bases.
Not for the bases.
Not for the bases, okay.
Those are just for the flags.
Got it.
The stacking rules, as we'll see, will be each faction can place one of their structures into each province.
Okay.
Simple as that. Okay, so I think I'm going to take you now on a tour of the different factions in the game. This out a minute. The Delhi Sultanate, so the game begins, it's 1290, and Alauddin Khalji has come in and claimed the throne in Delhi. He is the Sultan in Delhi, and he's ruling both the court and the surrounding environments with an iron fist. There are no known rebellions during the tenure of Sultan Alauddin Khalji.
Or maybe they just didn't write about the rebellions that did happen.
They may not have been recorded. That's right. The Sultan feels the need to maintain a large store of resources, both to keep all of the elite nobles of Delhi in line and also to maintain a standing army. It's not pleasant to be the Sultan, actually. However, it's been known for centuries that there are riches in the south, in the subcontinent, in the what's called the Deccan Plateau, south of this impassable Vindhya range, and so there are mines, and there's just a lot of economic activity. There's a lot of people down there, and so the Sultan has, and again, for previous centuries, it's been known that there are wealthy kingdoms to the south, like the Kakatiyas in Warangal or the Yadavas in Devagiri, and so. So the Sultan, the Delhi Sultanate's points, win condition in the game, is simply the total prosperity of the tributary provinces. And so they start off the game tributary markers placed everywhere. They start off with the maximum possible points of 18. And so the Delhi Sultanate, as you might imagine, is going to struggle to maintain this kind of control. And the Sultanate will win the game if they lose the country more slowly than they did historically. What pieces do they have to achieve this? They have troops. Each of these cubes represents about 10,000 troops. They have important and powerful governors. These governors are going to, let me describe what the governors can do a little bit later in reference to some other pieces, but they're very powerful, and you have to be a little careful with them because they're, if they get too far away from Delhi, they might start having their own ideas. And finally, their structures are kasbahs, basically fort cities, which are going to both improve conscription of troops into that province, and also are going to allow for any attacks in an adjacent province to potentially include up to 2 units in support.
Okay. And you have 4 of those, so strategically you can place those so they almost connect to most all provinces in some way, shape, or form.
You can do that so that you have a 5th. There's one that starts off in the game.
Got it.
When we first played this game with Jason Carr, I think his first and immediate instinct, I think, was just to place a nice wall of kasbahs up. And so he already had ideas that he was coming in with, which was amazing to me because he had never played the game, and yet he was bringing a lot of just generic strategy from other coin games and things into play.
Well, when you said allow in adjacent, I'm thinking spread them out so that they touch every space on the map in some way, shape, or form.
I see. Yes. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
yes, that's probably worth thinking about. In addition, they can also be used. Matthew really likes the strategy of having one nearby from the Mongol invasion regions because they can be used up there as well.
Yep.
Next, if we move down south, we have the Bahmani Kingdom. In the Bahmani Kingdom, the beginning of the game in 1290, the Bahmani Kingdom does not yet exist. This faction is composed, it's a breakaway faction from the Delhi Sultanate, and it's primarily composed of former governors of Delhi and other minor rulers called
so these
amirs.
guys who have turned blue.
Indeed.
Yeah. They got their own ideas.
When they get their own ideas, they cease to become useful to the Delhi Sultanate.
Nice.
That's right. And they begin the game in upside down. This is their obedient state. As obedient is in reference to their relationship to the Sultan in Delhi. So if the Sultan sees these minor rulers as more or less still paying their tributary payments and they're in line with expectations, then there may be some concerns. There may be some paranoia that comes, and this certainly does happen. This is such a Game of Thrones kind of period of history. It's crazy the number of assassinations and succession crises, and it's a real mess. So there were definitely some paranoid actions taken. And so with obedient units, the Sultan may be able to send a governor in kind of soft power maneuvering to remove obedient units from their powerful positions. At the same time, they may be even able to build a kasbah. So governors can be very, very dangerous to the other factions. However, if the Sultan has become directly aware of these rulers not on his side, then things change. Once at some point in the game, they may flip to their rebelling side. Obedient pieces, since they're ostensibly in line, cannot be attacked, but they can be governed. Rebelling amirs cannot be governed.
They can be attacked.
But they may be attacked.
Yeah.
And these governors come with an extra 10,000 forces, so they make their own judicial systems. That's not precisely in the game, but they can also be part of any attacking group on some rebelling pieces. The Bahmani Kingdom also has these structures, which are forts. Forts reduce the strength of attacks on their faction in that province. And like kasbahs, they allow for attacks in adjacent provinces to be accompanied by up to 2 supporting amirs.
Got it.
What is the Bahmani Kingdom trying to achieve in this game? Well, they've had enough with the Delhi Sultanate. They would prefer to keep some resources locally for themselves. and they want autonomy. And so they are seeking to cast off tributary markers and to claim regions as independent. When they do so, their win condition involves the total prosperity of the Bahmani-controlled independent provinces. So in this case, they would get 2 points, and the Delhi Sultanate would lose 2. They also get points for the number of forts placed onto the map. And they score points based on the Deccan Influence track. Deccan Influence is a different dimension of engagement between just the two southern factions, the Bahmani Kingdom and the Vijayanagara Empire. And it's a bit of a hearts and minds struggle for which way are things going to tip in the Deccan. If we can manage to get the Delhi Sultanate off of our backs, which way is history going to go?
Yeah.
And that can be manipulated. There are event cards which manipulate influence. There are, if there is a battle, the victor will gain influence, the loser will lose influence, and there are other economic means of adjusting influence. You migrate into a new territory, and you spend a few more resources. You might be able to convince the people of the area that, you should be planting a Bahmani flag in your backyard.
And it looks like you can also gain additional units as you move up that track to unlock those.
There are, as you can imagine, benefits to having influence in a region.
Everybody wants to be with the winner.
You want to be with the winner. So the Bahmani Kingdom, as its influence advances, it will have greater access to cavalry, which are very powerful in the game. And they will be able to unlock new potential allies. These might be representative of visitors and artisans, merchants who were actively courted by the Bahmani Kingdom to come from Central Asia.
Okay.
And so, the Bahmani Kingdom became a real center of high culture, and it's a very fascinating kingdom we could discuss. While the Vijayanagara Empire, that I'm going to shift into talking about in a moment here, have access to many more potential allies, and those would represent the Nayaka warrior kings from fallen kingdoms like the Kakatiya Empire in Warangal that the Sultanate managed to dismantle. Nevertheless, in the embers of that kingdom would rise various minor rulers, which eventually would come to be part of the growing Vijayanagara Empire.
Okay.
Last but not least, the Vijayanagara Empire is the third playable faction in the game. At its height, in the 15th century, they would be the second largest city on the planet. So right behind Beijing is the Vijayanagara Empire. As Columbus is looking for the riches of India, he's looking for Vijayanagara.
Okay.
Sprawling, 500,000 people. They too begin the game fairly oppressed by requirements from the Sultan. They're maybe a little bit more geographically comfortable further from Delhi. Nevertheless, there are periodic reminders and campaigns from Delhi that knock on the door and have expectations put on them, and they're fairly stiff. So
Well, and there's a Casbah right there, right?
there's a Casbah right there. The Vijayanagara Empire is also interested in hoisting up its own independent empire, and so their victory points are computed similarly as the Bahmanis. So they would like to cast off tributary markers, plant their own Vijayanagara Empire independent flags. They also get points for their Deccan influence, and they get points for placing their structures, which are temples. Temple towns, if you'd like, are beneficial in a slightly different way than the other structures. They improve the ability for the Vijayanagara Empire to rally new allies, and these are called Rajas, the minor rulers of the Vijayanagara Empire. And they can also be used for attacks on adjacent, or to support attacks on adjacent provinces, but only using one Raja rather than two, which is the case for the other two factions. The rest of the board, what do we have to say? The sequence of play you'll be familiar with, especially if you've played any coin games or in particular People Power. So this is a direct port from Ken T's People Power. I think maybe with that, what I can still present is what the factions can do to actually achieve what they're trying to achieve. And then there are very fairly simple combat rules, which we can potentially just go over the first time we have that happen.
Yeah, we
Sometimes
can
I
do
like a
that.
rolling kind of
Yeah,
teach. So maybe I'll just take.
Nice looking player aids there.
These will be a little firmer in the final copy, but the printer is.
But
is
they
what
look
it is.
great.
So,
Nice.
so the Delhi Sultanate. What can the Delhi Sultanate do to achieve its aims? First of all, there are basic commands and special decrees. On a chosen command and decree, you choose one of each, and they can be played in either order. So you can do the command and then the decree, or vice versa. And there's no taking part of a command, adding a decree in the middle, and then continuing on the command, like in
Okay.
some coin games.
Okay,
So it's a little
right.
simpler in that sense. The Delhi Sultanate can conscript new troops in tributaries or spaces with Kasbahs. That's one reason to place Kasbahs, and it's more you'll be able to conscript more troops in those regions. And in Delhi, many troops can be conscripted. They can march just to relocate any number into an adjacent province of troops and governors. Governing is how you're exercising sovereign authority. So in tributaries, you can either place governors. You send your loyal governor out to a province, and if they are already there, however, instead a govern can be used to both remove up to 2 obedient units and build a Kasbah. So that's a very powerful move if they're on the map already. In addition, governors, they're powerful in the early game with obedient pieces, and they're critical in the late game because you'll need a governor and control of an independent space to plant that tributary marker back down. It's not enough just to have enough troops out there. You need someone to go out there and take control of the situation, more or less. And then finally, an attack on, again, only rebelling pieces. Mongol invaders always treated as rebelling.
Okay.
Their special decrees are to collect tribute. They'll get half their total tributary value, which is a reason for them to keep that high.
Yeah.
And they'll gain 2 powerful cavalry tokens every time they collect tribute.
So that's resources that they're getting
That's
that
right.
they can then spend.
Exactly. They can make very large campaigns, either out into the southern provinces or up into the Mongol invasion regions, dropping off and picking up as they go.
Okay.
And then they can demand obedience. And this, again, in the late game, is how they plant their tributary marker back down, which requires a governor.
Got it.
The Bahmani Kingdom, how can the Bahmani Kingdom achieve what they are trying to achieve? They also have commands and decrees, naturally. Their commands are to rally, to persuade emirs to join their kingdom, and so they require a Bahmani peace where they're going to rally. They get an additional benefit if it's in Maharashtra, their kind of home turf. And if it is independent, they get yet another bonus to rallying new emirs to their cause. Migration, up to 3 emirs can be moved to an adjacent province. When they migrate, they have the opportunity to spend additional resources to increase their influence and decrease that of the other southern faction. They can attack. If they attack the Delhi Sultanate, that will flip them to rebelling. The Sultan will remember this, but obedient rebelling has nothing to do with the interaction between the 2 southern factions. That's only the relationship to the Delhi Sultanate. And then there's to rebel, and this does not matter in the beginning of the game, because in the beginning of the game, for the first 30 years or so, Alauddin Khalji is not going to allow it. And so during this first dynasty, this is not possible, but then there's kind of a shift in gears in the game, and then once the Tughlaq dynasty begins, rebellion will be possible. For that, you're going to need a majority of pieces in the space to cast off the tributary marker.
Okay.
And then immediately you control it because, of course, you have majority. The special decrees are to trade in the number of provinces where the Bahmanis have a peace. They'll gain a resource and cavalry. They were known by their contemporaries as Ashvapati, Lord of Horses. They had a great access to cavalry and were intimidating militarily at the time. As a matter of fact, in this century, they would be quite a bit more advanced than the Vijayanagara Empire, on par with maybe just below the military capacity of the Delhi Sultanate. But these were, in large part, the Sultanate's governors. So they had access to a lot, and they had huge trade networks running throughout the subcontinent. So their trading ability will be helpful for their resources. They can build forts, and they can conspire to form bonds with aggrieved elites.
Sounds devious.
It is quite devious. So if a governor is in the same space with the wrong emir,
Would you come on over
it's
to
a,
us?
it's a conversa- It's just a conversation. and then that can be replaced by
Got it.
a Bamini, a mir. If the influence is sufficiently high, you can conspire with governors in even neighboring provinces. And you can even conspire with sufficient influence, the Vijayanagara Rajas you
Okay.
can bring onto your side.
Nice.
So that's a good incentive for the Baminis to keep their influence nice and high, that and the cavalry gained with trade. And then lastly, the Vijayanagara Empire. They can similarly rally to persuade Rajas to join the empire. They get an additional bonus if there's a temple. They get an additional bonus if it's in Karnataka, their home province, and an additional bonus if it is an independent province. So if there was a temple in an independent Vijayanagara-controlled Karnataka, they can plant 4 Rajas there in one shot. They can also migrate up to 3 and do some potential influence building economically. If they migrate, I should say, into a space that also includes the other of the 2 factions. So you need someone to see it.
Yeah.
They can rebel once the Tughlaq dynasty begins and things start going a little bit soft in Delhi, and they can attack. Their special decrees are to tax, but they're only going to be able to collect resources when they tax in the independent Vijayanagara-controlled provinces. So they have a real incentive to rebel early. They can build temples, and they can compel, just a soft/hard compel
Come to my side.
allies into service. And this is a great way to expand reach very rapidly because it places up to 2 Rajas into an adjacent province. Rallying only allows you to grow where you already have pieces, but this can jump to a new space. And then potentially, if you are sufficiently influential, when you add those allies to your banner, they can also do a little bit of dirty work for you at the same time, removing other pieces. And then lastly, and I think we'll just see this once we get going, but when the factions are guiding the Mongol invaders to take their commands, they will have to choose exactly 2. You can take the same command twice, but it's either amassing Mongols into the mountain passes, advancing ever closer to Delhi, and attacking in any of these 3 spaces with stiffer and stiffer penalties to the Delhi Sultanate, depending on how close they are to Delhi. Delhi's going to lose resources. They're going to have to bring troops back up. It's going to be ugly.
Got it.
And I think maybe with that, it'd be a good time to just choose some factions that we
Sure.
want to test out. The Delhi Sultanate is the most challenging
Real
to play.
quick,
Yes.
how long is the game?
The game, so the game was designed from the very beginning. The goal was to get a game that could be played in under an hour and a half.
Got it.
The first play is going to be 2 hours. I can play it in 20 minutes,
Got it.
which, from a design perspective, is just fantastic because you make a tweak and you can play the game 10 times in a row just to get a feel for it. Unlike some of the longer games, so that's been a benefit of the shorter game. But the goal is 90 minutes.
Okay. Nice. Well, I'm excited.
Yes,
I don't know about you.
I'm happy
so-
to jump on in, but thanks very much for kind of guiding us
Yeah.
through that. Hopefully that was helpful, and we'll see more in a little bit.